and you made time. People rarely remember what you bought for them. They remember how you made them feel. They remember that you were there. 2, the kindness you showed. Kindness doesn't need a reason. It doesn't need an occasion. It doesn't need to be big. The door held open. A word said at the right time. Noticing someone who nobody else noticed. That's it. That's all it takes. And it lives in people long after the memories are gone. Number 3, the love you expressed. Too many people carry love they never say, the appreciation they never shared, the apology they never gave. We wait for the perfect moment. Then life moves faster than we expected. Love was never meant to stay trapped inside of you. Say it while you still can, even if the words come out imperfectly. Number 4, the memories you created. Think of the best memory you have. Someone made that happen. Someone said, let's go. Someone planned it and showed up and put the effort in. Good memories don't just appear. Someone creates them. The world has enough people watching life go by. Be the one who makes something worth remembering. Number 5, the example you set. Every single day, without trying, without knowing, you are teaching people how to live. The child watching how you treat others. The person beside you watching how you manage a difficult day. You don't get to choose whether you're setting an example. You only get to choose what kind. Number 6, the impact you leave on people. Not what you owned, not what you accumulated, what remains inside other human beings. The confidence you helped someone find, the hope you gave when they were close to giving up. Belief you planted with a few simple words. You may forget those moments. They often don't. That's the impact that lasts. And when our soul leaves this world, money and material things won't matter, but the love we gave, the lives we've touched, and the good we left behind will continue long after we're gone. Thank
You know, and speaking of adventures, I don't know if anybody saw this last week on the news, but 2 people, 2 daredevils, had climbed to in New York City, the Empire State Building. You go up to a certain floor for observation, and then everything above that is supposed to be off limits. But these 2, and I'm not suggesting this, so please don't try this at home. But they got out and they free climbed up the towers and the antennas, which are like 50 feet high, these antennas, and went to the top of the antenna of the Empire State Building and unfurled a flag. And when I heard about this, I was like, what are these people like? Crazy a little bit. I think you have to be a little bit crazy to do that, but that's what they do in life. They're daredevils. They try these things, they push themselves, and this was one of their although illegal ventures. But when I saw the flag that they had used, I actually wrote down the saying, because I had heard it before, but I hadn't really thought about it in a really long time. So I wrote it down, so I want to read it word for word. It said, and this was on the flag that they put on top of the antenna of the top of the Empire State Building. That's something like, I don't know, 1,700 feet high or something, whatever crazy amount it was. But it said, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Now that's attributed to Jimi Hendrix. I don't know if that's really who said it, because I haven't researched it. I didn't take a look at that, but it's attributed to a singer from the 1960s, famous guitarist, and singer and songwriter. And I thought about those words and looking at Jimi Hendrix, if he did say it back in the 1960s, where we were in our country at that time, There was a lot of things going on. There were civil rights protests happening. There were gender rights. There was all kinds of things coming up and bubbling up that had been suppressed for so long, and people were done. We're protesting this. We're going to do this. And I don't feel it was necessarily, maybe it was done in a political manner when this quote was given. But it made me think about what happens in our world, what's happened all throughout human history in our world, not in one country or the other, but as a world, as humanity. And when we think about world history, or if you study world history, it's always been about somebody trying to conquer some other land or some group of people or getting more of something. It's always been about, I've got this, but I want what you have, and therefore I'm going to take it. Or we're going to wage a war because we can't figure it out. So whoever comes out in the war is going to get what they're after. And as I think about these things, I get myself, I think about them too much, I think, sometimes. But with that quote, it made me think about our history, our world history as human beings has always been about power. It's always been about taking, and it's always been about what's not mine, I want. Now, we can individually make different choices. You know, we can say, well, you've got that. I don't need that right now, so you can have it, or we can share it, or whatever the case is. We can make individual choice. But as a history of our world, it hasn't been that so much like, let's play fair. It's been more like, let's take what I want. And when we look at that, we're looking at power grabs, then we've got to counterbalance those with people doing good things. When you look at babies, right? And this is what always fascinates me. You put babies together in a group, right? They could be any religion, any background, any ethnic base of that child. And do they find a toy that they may want? Yes. But do they sit next to somebody else and not like them just because they're a different religion or a different color or a different background? No, they play together. They do things together. They commit together. They work in ways, even as toddlers, taking away the toddler mentality sometimes, but they do things together. There was a lovely thing a few years ago. It made some of the news casts, where there was a little, two little boys, and they went to their teacher because they decided to wear the same shirt, or they got the same haircut. I can't quite remember exactly what it was, but they thought they looked alike, and they went to their teacher and said, look, we're twins. And they were two different ethnic backgrounds. So if you looked at them, you wouldn't think they were twins, but they saw themselves as twins because there was no power grab. There was no thought in their mind that I'm different than you or you're different than me. And therefore we can live in peace. We can dress the same. We can look the same. We can act the same. And because basically, guess what? We are the same. We are the same. Most people, what do they want? They want peace. Most people want to live in happiness. Most people want to live where they can reach out to somebody else and say, hey, I need some help, or can I help you? Most people want those things because within us is that soul. Within us is that spirit. Within us is not about power, it's about love. It's about love. And when we look at spiritual leaders throughout history, and there's been many and millions, but You look at the man Jesus, not Christ Jesus, but the man Jesus. You look at the Buddhist principle. You look at Muhammad. You look at Dr. Martin Luther King. You look at Nelson Mandela. You look at these people who have walked this earth and have said, love is important. They have said, look, let's work together. Let me give you what I have to share. They've said throughout time, throughout history, as countries have tried to grab other people's land or beings or things, they have stood and said, but there is love. Let's work within love. So people talk about love. Religion doesn't always follow that. Religion doesn't always follow that. Because there have been religious leaders, popes, back in the day that began wars. They did because they wanted their religion to be the best, the most important. Power, not love. And when we think about love, a lot of times we think about, somebody is in a relationship or somebody's married or somebody has a child and it's that kind of love. Well, it is, but it's so much more. It's so much more. It's looking at things from a perspective of how equal and the same we are versus how different we are. As spiritualists, when we work with the spirit world and we have a communicator from the spirit world, do they come back in communication to say, hey, I died with, $3 million and 5 cars and, 2 big houses and this and that? That may be part of their history, but is that what they talk about? Very infrequently. Do they talk about, hey, I took over that country? That was my claim to fame back in my day. Do they talk about that? No, what do they talk about? They talk about what Candy was talking about before. They talk about relationships. They talk about regrets. They talk about love. They talk about what we bring within our soul from place to place to place, from this world into the spiritual world. That is something that nobody can take from us. That's something that power may belong to the world, as it has shown in history, but love belongs to eternity. To eternity. And we can't, and I understand this, we can't always walk around every day of, oh, la, 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 la. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about don't be a part of the world, don't be aware of the world, don't be as a human being in the world. But can we be a human being that is steeped in love, looks at it from that perspective of the spiritual leaders of the past, who have made that their number one rule? Can we look at these things from that perspective rather than what you have, I want, and therefore I'm going to take? It can be a strange time sometimes when we as spiritual beings have that internal struggle of humanity and spirituality, because sometimes they don't go together so easily. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And in our humanness, are we perfect? Absolutely not. In our spirituality, are we perfect? Absolutely not. But what do we learn? What can we take from what we learn? And what can we implement in terms of being better souls, better people, better world? It's something that's not always easy. We get angry. We get upset. We say things that sometimes we mean in that moment of time. We are cruel sometimes or mean sometimes as humans. Is that part of our walk here? Maybe it is. Maybe it is to learn that power isn't the important thing, but love is. What we leave, the footprints we leave behind, are they filled with hope? Are they filled with things that the next generation can pick up on and move ahead what we couldn't? I hope so. I hope so. I am the eternal optimist when it comes to humanity. Sometimes I'm not, but most of the time, I do honestly believe we can keep doing better. I honestly believe that as a group of beings, that what we see in the world is not the only thing that we're capable of. And I do believe that love is important enough to fight for. That love is important enough to be present about, and important enough to talk about, and important enough to be the example for. And if each one of us can be that example for a minute, for an hour, for a day, for a week, for a month, for a year, for a lifetime, that energetic allows that next generation to move into a space already with that vibration. Already with that vibration. Just as if we leave power as the most important thing, that next generation comes into that energy of power is the most important thing. So do we make these decisions, and do we do this 24/7 as a human being? Can we stay in that understanding all the time? Not always, because it's hard. Life can be hard. We go through struggles, we go through illness, we go through difficulties with family, with job, with whatever it happens to be. And it can be hard sometimes to stay in that thought of love, that this is a lesson. What am I learning? Where can I take this to? But to me, if we can keep the kind of, car that we're driving in that energy on track, on in our lane, moving forward, we have the opportunity, and I think that's a key word, opportunity, to change the energy of what doesn't work to what can work, so that can there be peace on earth? You hear everybody talk about, right? There's songs about that. There's protests about that. There's marches about that. There's this about that. There's always the people, who are doing the pageants are always, I want world peace, kind of thing. But we wouldn't want it if it wasn't possible. We wouldn't want it if it wasn't possible. So what do? Perhaps we look at love. That's not as important as power, but more important than power. And see where that takes us in our world, in our life, in the humanity that we can move out of what was to what could be and what is. We all have a responsibility in our world, whatever that responsibility is. But if we make those choices based on what we want rather than what is, or what doesn't work, or what we feel doesn't work, then it feels like we can progress. So, Candy, I want to thank you for reading what you did, because it makes so much sense in terms of what these people did, climbing the crazy, Empire State Building, unfurling this flag, looking at things and saying, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Hopefully you can find that in your heart to start stepping into that. Thank you.